lot of challenging things, particular from the audit or from the finance perspective for not only our business but every business in our market. So I just wanted to talk quickly and give you some perspective on the finance side, and then Jeff Joyner, if once I'm done, if you give us a quick comment with respect to the healthcare industry and where we are today. I appreciate that. So from the finance world, just to let you know, in April, as you know, the CARES Act came out, had many components of the act, and I'll just speak to those that were directed at finance and banking. We had the PPP SBA program, which in the first round funded $349 billion to businesses across the United States under the PPP called the Payroll Protection Program, which was meant for business to obtain financing, continue to fund their payroll costs as defined by the program, so that they could basically keep people employed whether or not they were functioning or open for business. There was a second round of that funding. As you're aware, it was in the $250 billion range. That just to bring it home here, our bank, Community Bank, handled 3,300 applications and over $500 million worth of PPP funding from April through May. So we basically, if you divide that in two, you're at 1,500 applications a month that were actually processed, documented, and closed, which is very significant. So that that's just community banks, and coupled with that, because of other factors, obviously in the markets, many businesses are hurt. They're not able to open, or just being able to open now. You have commercial, retail, and apartment rentals that are all being affected. And just along those lines, there's deferral programs that a lot of customers ask for, coming in looking for some form of payment relief, whether that be interest only for a period of time or P&I deferral for a period of time. And again, just our bank has handled 1,300 clients and has worked deferrals on $550 million approximately. So those are things that are just not normal activities for our region. That's all aside from normal banking activity. So there's a lot of stuff going on, an awful lot of pressure on our economies and on our cash flow streams, and we're dealing with it, and hopefully as things open up and get moving, we'll begin seeing a recovery, although it probably will have some hangover effect for quite a while. So I just wanted to throw some of that information out, let you know that there's an awful lot of activity across the country, and we're just a microcosm of that, and give you a brief update. With that, I'd ask Jeff Joyner, if you wouldn't mind, to give us a quick update on what's happening on the medical side of things.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. We've seen several positives this week here in this community here at Fox. We've ramped back up in terms of elective surgeries. So we started that process on Monday. We've got probably almost at budget over the next 3 weeks in terms of cases coming back in. So the positive is that people still want to come to a hospital. We're seeing in our primary care practices, we're seeing increase in patients. We're going up probably about 15% each week, as well as all of our other outpatient practices, imaging, PT, OT. So that's very positive here in this community. We've been very fortunate. We have not had any COVID patients here at Fox or in this community for over 3 weeks. I think that's really due to individuals in our community really adhering to the best practices that have been put in place. When you go out to different stores, you see people keeping their distance, they're using a mask, they're wiping things down, they're doing all the things that that we need to do to make sure we keep this in check. So I'm hopeful that I think tomorrow we start opening up manufacturing, construction, and other industries here, and as we slowly move towards June 1st, where we'll move into phase 2, we'll start to ramp this back up. But we got to continue to keep these practices in place. Even here at the hospital, I've started to see some people, not adhering to what they should be doing, and we've had to reinforce that with our community here at the hospital, and to the greater community, we need to do that as well. I do have concerns about this virus. I am a student of history, and if you look at history and what happened in 1918, it wasn't the virus when it was created. Well, they believe it was not created. It was I guess the word, it happened here in America back in 1918, and then it traveled with the U.S. soldiers over to World War I. But it was the mutation and how the virus mutated that really caused it to become so deadly over in the trenches of World War I. And that's where the concern I have with this virus is that we don't know enough about it. If you go and really look at the CDC, you look at the medical journals, you look, don't follow what you're seeing on CNN and all the news channels. Actually look at the actual data that's coming out, and then you see the information that's coming from overseas and internationally. It's very concerning, and how this will develop. I mean, a good example is what's happening down in New York City with the children right now. We don't know enough about this virus and how it mutates. So that's the one concern I have with this, and I've had it since day one, is how will this virus develop as it moves from host to host throughout this world? So we do have a long way to go, I believe, until we get a vaccine and people talk about, well, if you have a treatment, but the problem is the treatment will only really cure one form of that virus. And as that virus mutates, you can't use the same treatment. So the challenge for us is, getting enough testing and also getting enough of the vaccine into the community. The challenge that we're also finding up in this community is we've started to test all hospital employees. And we started this last week in the network, and we did the first 177 employees that we did, which were all high-risk employees. And what we mean by high risk are employees who are on the front lines. They're the ones who are doing the swabs. They're the ones in the emergency department. They're the ones working up on the units when we had patients. And we had over 44 COVID patients here at Fox Hospital alone. Of those 177 employees that we tested looking for the antibodies, we only had 2, which was very concerning for us because it means that the virus has not really spread and gotten to enough people that, you start to get the antibodies and be able to test. The reason why we're doing this is we're trying to find employees who do have the antibodies so that we can get them to donate blood so that we can actually do research and test. So we still have a long way to go, but we're moving in the right direction, I guess, is the theme that I'm trying to pass along today. So, and if there's any questions, I'd be free to try to answer them for you.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jeff Lord. I'm just curious. I've talked to some folks, some management and some staff people at various places that have been opened, like nursing homes, people that work there. And they've implemented testing, which is actually multiple tests a week. But yes. I'm very ignorant of this. But my understanding when the tests were originally done is it took 4 or 5 days to get the test results. So having 2 tests a week doesn't seem to make sense to me. But have they sped up that process in terms of testing? Yeah,
it usually takes about 48 hours to do the testing. So yes, that was a mandate that was put on to us last week, where you got to ramp up, and we're starting it next week. It's not a realistic process because doing 2 tests a week is not going to really show anything. And it's really, I could see if we had to test all employees once a week, and that would be fine. But going twice a week, and especially, doing it for the whole entire state, I think was wrong because, you got to look at regions. Again, we've been, thankfully, knock on wood, virus-free in this community for the last 3 weeks. And as long as, and we've shut down the nursing home, we've got that lockdown, like that really got to go through several steps just to get into the building for employees. And there's only one entrance point into that building, and that's actually through the hospital. So there's no real way to, get in there. So I think it was a little bit too much. I think they were trying to cure a problem, but they put in a process that's going to be overwhelming. And a lot of the, we're very fortunate. Our nursing home is attached to our actual hospital, and it's part of the hospital system. So we have easier access to a lot of tests. But a lot of these for-profit and private, not-for-profit nursing homes out in the communities, they're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Hey, I have two questions, Jeff Lord, if I could ask them. One is for Cheryl on because I'm looking at this fall, I'm looking at public schools, and for the economics, obviously, I'm looking at Hartwick and Suco. So my question for Cheryl is how they're operating in a very large building with a lot of employees. The other one is for Jeff Joyner, the prospect of being able to test at a level that would allow students to return. I mean, if we don't have 8,000 students come back in Oneonta in late August, early September, we've got a huge problem.
Yeah, so I can
Cheryl, you
answer
want to go ahead?
Yep, from our side, actually we've been really fortunate. We're pretty much able to work from home almost 100%. We have 40 people on site, and that's it, of our 800 staff members. So we've developed a return to work strategy that actually spans over 4 phases, and we're working with Bassett on all the intake and cleaning protocol. Our plan really, because we're going to actually have a call Friday to understand resurgence possibility. We're likely not going to even get to 50% of our staff until the end of the year coming back. So that's how we're tackling it. We're going slow because we're able to function from home. So we're just taking it really phase by phase to see how that works out.
You're going to have access to tests, Cheryl, do you think?
No, we are partnering with Bassett, though, if we do have a positive case where they can come in and do essentially the tracing and do cluster testing in the circles where that individual worked.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl.
Yep.
And Dave, in terms of that's going to be a requirement, I think, for students to come back to any school, especially in the SUNY system throughout the state. The question is whether or not they're going to be able to do it. If you saw the news yesterday, I think it's University of California, their largest university system out there in California. They're not coming back in the fall. They've already made that decision. And I think that's probably just the start. I think you're going to start to see a lot more colleges in certain hot areas, hot zones, not coming back in the fall and waiting until January. So, but testing, I think, is going to be a requirement.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. And Jeff, thank you for the update. We certainly appreciate that. We'll jump back into the agenda here. Everyone got the March 12th Audit Finance Committee minutes, and if there are no questions, comments, or modifications to those, I'd look for a motion to approve those.
I'll make that motion, Dave Rowley.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Cheryl.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any no opposed? All right, thank you. Now we'll move to the payment of the bills. In our packet, Megan had provided us a list of bills to pay. Megan, are you going to shoot those up? Megan?
Sorry, it takes a minute to change the screen. It's
Okay.
there. It is.
Great. So you can see there the bills to pay, pretty much standard stuff. You still see ISD because technologically we're doing these types of things. You've seen the rental payment in Philadelphia insurance, I presume is our liability / D&O insurance premiums.
Correct.
All right. So I'd like a motion to pay the bills.
I'll make the motion. Dave?
Thank you, Dave. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andrew. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We also are, Megan has provided us the deposits that have been made. She's clicked over to that screen. You can see receipts and what they're for. So that's informationally. And we'll now move into the review of financials. Those, again, were provided prior to this meeting, had several, the month-to-date, year-to-date, budget comparison, etc. As you can imagine, not a lot of new activity out there. So it's probably, unless there's a question, we'll move down into the bullet points of new business, into the projections of budgets. But are there any questions or comments on the financials? All right, we'll take that as no. And Jody, do you just want to move right into the revised 2020 projections and budget?
Sure. What I did was I've been working on somewhat worst case scenarios. So in comparing it to our adopted budget, I did send out a revised budget. I have not included any income from Skyline Hospitalities at this point in time because that project has not been approved yet. On Hale Transportation, as most of you are aware, that they are having financial difficulties and have requested, they're evaluating whether to renew a lease, whether to request less amounts, payments to us. So at the present time, I've zeroed them out to the end of May, showing no additional income from them. I've also decreased the Chamber of Commerce since they've moved out of our building. The OCCRC, I've moved that to a different portion of the budget. That money will remain in there, but I've moved it to a different section. So on the first page, it'll show it being zeroed out. That'll appear later on. The Otsego County appropriation, I've decreased that by 10%. I had a discussion last week with Alan, the county treasurer, and he said that right now that's a reasonable number to assume that it's going to be reduced by. And I attended the IGA committee meeting this Tuesday, and Meg Kennedy said, as far as she knows, it was just going to be a 10% reduction for all outside agencies. So at this time we reduced it 75,000 down to 67,500. A week ago Saturday, the New York State budget director sent out a email to all state agencies asking them, telling them that they were not to enter into any new contracts to freeze appropriations because of the state budget deficit. So erring on the side of caution, I've zeroed out all state grant funding that we were anticipating. So I've taken out the GE microgrid study, the halal meat processing budget. Now, since that time, Empire State Development has told me that they are going to honor all existing contracts. So that money may come back in, but at the present time, we kind of zeroed those out. Also on the second page, you'll see where the pilot payments that OCCRC is getting, we'll be showing that as the revenues coming into our agency that we bill them for. Because of the cuts in state budget, again, in anticipation, we've zeroed out the sale of property to the halal meat processing facility. So I decreased that by 180,000 as well. But it appears from this, according to the Empire State Development, that money is still there and they will receive it. I've talked to Hans, we'll talk about that under projects, but Hans is still planning to go ahead with the project, anticipates it'll be delayed by about 3 or 4 months, but still plans on purchasing the property at the end of summer. And again, continuing into professional contracts on expense sides, I've taken out again the halal meat processing, the GE energy study. I did add in the MRB group because we've awarded them 2 contracts, one for the EDA grant application, which they've completed and sent in. And the second is the Oneonta Rail Yards master plan work that they've contracted to work with us on. The last thing was, I zeroed out all the capital projects at this point in time, and I'm assuming that we'll hopefully have those back in the budget for next year. The one thing that I forgot to add into the budget that we'll have to make a change to the next time we send this out is we do have a award for Alpine Roofing to do the soccer concessions fields. So I've got to add that cost. That'll be another $11,300 in expenses. So when you look at all of the changes that have occurred, we're probably looking at an $85,000 deficit right now, maybe $90,000 when you add Alpine in. Now, hopefully, whether we end up selling the Ioxis building or we sell the property to the halal meat processing facility or we get revenues from Skyline Hospitality, that will more than offset any one of those projects, would more than offset any projected deficit that we're showing right now. But again, to err on the side of conservatism, I've decreased all those numbers by that amount. So that's kind of where the revised budget is right now.
Thank you for that update, Jody. Any questions? Okay. So let's move through the other business. Jody, you've got 2 other items on here: Hale Transportation lease and Ioxis appraisal update. You want to address those?
Yes, on the Hale Street Transportation bus company, again, they indicated their lease expires at the end of this month. They've indicated that they originally said that they would like to have for 3 months reduced rent. That's changed now, that they want to reduce rent by roughly a third to drop the yearly payments from $60,000 down to $40,000. We've had one board member indicate to us that he's got a potential client that's looking to the possibility of purchasing that building from us. And then Cheryl raised the question whether we have the ability to, under the pandemic issues, to even consider having him leave. Kurt maybe can speak about that, since I see he's on the phone. But basically, Kurt's indicated that he can stay there at least until the end of August.
Well, as you're probably aware, through the executive orders that Governor Cuomo has issued, he has put a moratorium on all evictions, and originally it was a 90-day moratorium from March 20th, but that's now been extended to August 20th. So, and then that moratorium for evictions applies not only to residential but commercial leases. So, from a landlord standpoint, if Hale were to stay in possession of the premises beyond the end of this month, there's not a whole lot we can do about it from a enforcement standpoint.
Jody and Kurt, this is Jeff. Quick question: what is the status of the lease in terms of its maturity or term? Where does it sit today?
Well, the term ends the end of this month, and there is a holdover provision in the lease that requires a 10% increase in the rent in the event of holdover.
And what does the state order have to do with expired leases?
Well, you can't.
I mean, I would assume it would apply to some at some level.
It applies to any eviction proceeding. So if the lease ends and Hale stays, the only remedy that that we would have as a landlord is to bring an eviction proceeding to have them removed on the basis that they no longer have a legal lease to be there, and we can't do that because of the moratorium on evictions.
Okay, and what is your understanding once August? Let's assume August comes and goes and nothing else changes. What's your understanding of what happens at that point legally?
Well, if the moratorium on evictions is lifted, then my understanding would be that you proceed. However, let me complicate it, or it's a little more complicated in that the New York State court system is operating on a kind of a limited basis. They've broken it down into the criminal matters, and then they've broken it down into essential Supreme Court civil matters, and then non-essential civil matters. And I don't think there's been any, I haven't seen anyway, any guidance as to where, evictions and that type of thing might end up in the, in the priority of what the courts are handling, because the courts are working kind of the same way now through electronic means and very limited personal appearances, and so that's there's going to be a lot of changes between now and August. So I don't have a real good answer for you, Jeff. I guess.
In anticipation of, originally we had made an offer back to him to decrease his rent for the next 3 months by, I think it was 50%, and then we would increase the rent by 10% for the remainder of the lease. So he was actually saving about $3,000 in lease payments. He rejected that offer and said that, well, he wants it dropped by a third for the entire year. He then countered and says, well, we could go on a reduced rent, and that we can put the building up for sale, and if we find a buyer, that we could give him 30 days notice for an eviction. But I'm not sure, as Kurt's indicating, that we can even do that because we don't know when the courts want what the eviction process would be. So I guess one of the questions for the finance committee is, do we want to entertain reducing his rent by a third and just keeping him there for another year? Do we want to try to provide a provision that we will do that with the understanding that if we find another buyer for the building, that he'd vacate the building within 30 days? Or do we just want to leave it as is and just, in fairness to Hale, he has lost a lot of business. Nobody's riding buses right now. He had a lot of work at SUNY Oneonta that is not obviously happening this year. So he has lost a good amount of revenue.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's no question that the relief is probably very reasonable. It's just how do we structure it? And I basically would say, let's, we have a tenant, we have someone paying. If we reduce his rent by a third and keep him in there and he continues to pay, the alternative is he doesn't pay and you still can't do anything. So if you reduce his rent by a third and extend your lease till either August or end of the year or something, I don't have a real great feel for how long you should extend the lease for, unless you're okay with going for an additional year as a we
could do it on a quarter basis or a 6-month basis. It doesn't doesn't have to be a year lease.
I agree with Jeff. And quite frankly, sooner or later, the moratorium is going to end. And if, say, in September, you have a buyer for the building, in the meantime, you've got a tenant paying. You have a tenant that is undergoing some severe financial stress. So let's do the 1/3 and keep them in the building.
If I could just say something. Tom here.
Sure, go ahead.
Right now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay, so as somebody to read had voluntary from the beginning reductions in payments of 25 to 40 without a payback, understanding we're all in the soup together and it's going to be tough for everybody to get to the other side. To me, I would agree that we work with them. The second thing is, one is financial, the other is how do we position ourselves in being cooperative with a business that's trying to hang on until things get better. But I think it's critically important that we be an organization that's flexible when we can be and when we should be to keep a business afloat.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else with thoughts, comments?
I would agree with that premise, especially because of what's happening with financials with businesses all around right now. The one thing that I would note is that I found this out on the second topic regarding appraisals. When we reduced, for example, IOXIS's rent from $10,000 a year to $5,000 a year, that will have an impact on the new appraised value because there's less revenue coming in. And the assessor said your appraisal is likely to go down because of that. So as we reduce rents, that will have an impact on the appraised value of the Hale Street property.
Not to complicate that discussion, but there's a double layer effect that's going to occur through our appraisal associations and our appraisal division. We've been having discussions about the impact of various types of property, and because this is such an anomalous year, when appraisers do income approaches, it's not really fair to pick up 20 and say, here, we're going to do an income approach based on the year 2020. But they will look back historically, look at the net operating income, and they will increase the cap rates or the discount rate applied to the value of the property on the NOI. So if you reduce your income and it shows an NOI that's reducing, as well as appraisers laying in a higher cap rate, it's going to have a double effect of reducing the value of the property. That's my point. That's complex, but over the long haul, that's what we're gonna see. I think in this case, however, this isn't anything that's unreasonable, and I think we should look at maybe doing this in quarterly or every 4 months, extending the lease, doing it for a third reduction, and then we'll revisit it at the end of that period. That would be my recommendation.
And I would support that. And why don't I draft up a proposed lease, review it with Kurt and have Megan, and we'll send it over to Hale and try to get a response before our board meeting.
Jody, I don't think you have to draft a brand new lease. We can just do an extension to the current lease. Extension and modification of the terms.
Okay.
Great.
That makes sense to me because a quarterly lease gets you basically to the end of the moratorium. At the same time, it gets you to the point where Hale will know whether you have college students coming back into town.
Right. Okay, great. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Next item on the agenda, IACSIS.
IACSIS, I've kind of sent everyone an email regarding the status of what's going on with that. Scotty Johnson has requested on Monday that we start having a new appraisal done. We've gotten one proposal in. We were hoping to get a second one in. Mr. Johnson indicated that his bank, apparently banks in Tennessee are a lot easier to deal with than New York State, because they said they just want the appraisal updated. They don't care who does it. So with that, we'd like permission, recommendations to go ahead and have the appraisal updated by whoever we get a proposal in by today from. And right now, that's the one firm that we have from Onion.
So Judy, just to be clear, the old appraisal, they'll accept the old appraisal with an update?
Yes.
All right, and isn't that, is that the firm, am I mistaken, is that the firm that he's retiring?
Yeah. Mr. Olam apparently retired in January of this year.
So is he in a position to be able to update it?
No, we were looking to, I'm trying to think of who the one appraisal, who was the appraisal that I sent you an email on?
Lonnie.
Lonnie.
Well, but so you're going to try to get him to review somebody else's. I mean, I don't want to get stuck on terminology, but typically, if you're getting an update, it has to be done by the agency that did it. Otherwise, a new appraisal. So I don't know how that. I'm just pointing that out. I don't want to bog down this conversation, but you know, if he's willing to review it, recertify it, or do a new appraisal based on the data that he had, that's fine. That's between you and he, I guess.
Okay, I'll confirm that with him today.
And they're okay in this bank, this Tennessee financial institution's okay with Lonnie. They don't have an approved appraiser list?
Apparently not. That's according to Scotty Johnson.
Okay. Fingers crossed.
So that's all I have for.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jody.
I said that's all I have for finance at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all we have. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Dave. Second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Audit finance is over.
Right. Pull up the agenda here for the projects meeting. So we'll move into the projects meeting. So again, echoing a lot of what Jeff already have commented, we're definitely in some really unprecedented times here. And I think we have to be mindful on the project side, the impact that the finances are having on both us as an organization, but also our business partners that we're working with. So I think this year is going to definitely have to be more of a fluid year on where our projects may take us, being able to be flexible and adapt to that which the state and again, our business partners' needs are. So with that, I will turn it to the project committee meeting minutes of March 12th. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I could take a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
I would second it. Whoever.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the project charters, I'll just preface this before Jody goes in. We've been discussing both the format and the content. So right now, these project charters are primarily looking at the activity logs and the progress that's been made on them. Jody is going to be working on updating the content to be potentially unique for each to make sure that we're capturing that which is important to frame the objective as well as the progress that we are making with that. So with that, Jody, I'll turn you over to go through the project charters, just highlighting any updates or key changes that may be taking place through the COVID-19 pandemic. You're on mute. I'm not hearing Jody. Is anyone else hearing him?
No, Jody, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I got to start again.
Yep.
Custom Electronics, about a week and a half ago, they received their reimbursement from the New York State Division of Housing and Community Renewal for about $186,000. They're kind of at about 35 new employees. They still have about 15 to add. The problem with that is that they're not doing any interviews right now because of the epidemic. We honestly believe that that will be a reason we're going to extend this grant deadline, and I'm sure the state will agree with that. Because up until now, we've been consistently adding employment and spending the money in a timely manner. So that's pretty much the update on Custom Electronics. Just so everyone's aware, they have been in discussions with IOCCRC about doing a joint venture. It's the first time in probably 4 years that the two companies have talked to each other, so that's a positive thing. We're extremely pleased that maybe they'll be able to work together on projects in the future.
You don't mean IOCCRC, do you?
Yes.
Okay, with the new ownership?
With the new ownership, yes.
Yep.
So there was apparently under the previous ownership of IOCCRC, there was some disagreements between the two companies that the new management and the new owners at IOCCRC don't really care about. They care about expanding and building their company. So that's kind of the good news with IOCCRC and Custom Electronics. Regarding the rail yards, the big issue on that is that we had our kickoff meeting with the MRB group. We started working on master plan update. We do have a meeting scheduled, I think, for Friday to have a discussion with them on a weekly basis as to where we're going with that. We have included in that conference call Eland Planning, which is the minority organization, Women and Business, Women and Minority Business component of the project. We've worked with Eland before, and they're a competent firm. So that's really the activity that's been occurring on that end. And we hope to have that study, the master plan, updated by within the next 60 to 90 days. We're trying to get a fast track on that so we can begin the next stage, which is actually the marketing of the property. And then the last one is that we want to discuss is the Richfield Springs Andela Products. Andela Products has been somewhat on hold while they were considered an essential manufacturing business because of the recycling work that they do. They've really had a decrease in orders in the last 2 months. And that's primarily because the businesses that they do with Ruby Lace glass are primarily in larger cities for resurfacing of bike lanes and bus lanes. And obviously that work has stopped. In the last 2 weeks, there's been a resurgence of construction projects, and they've gotten 2 large contracts from companies out in Connecticut to build construction block materials using glass products. So they've actually, between the orders that are coming in from that and their award of PPP assistance, they started bringing all their employees back. In fact, they've actually added 1 or 2 employees in the last week above their previous high. So they're actually back to full speed again. And they've been having discussions with the company from Holland again. And while the company in Holland obviously can't travel, they are in discussions about doing joint ventures together with them as well. Along those lines, we did complete the EDA application using the MRV group. We submitted that about 2 weeks ago. We've had a series of dialogues with EDA. They wanted, for example, an update from the Historic Preservation Office, which we obtained for them, new floodplain maps. Now their engineering review committee at EDA in Philadelphia wants to have a conference call today at noon to discuss some of the detailed components of the budget estimates. So hopefully we'll have answers for them. The big question they have is we have budgeted about $225,000 in the budget for design work. And what I explained to them yesterday, that $225,000 was budgeted for bringing on an engineer that would supervise the bidding process, the MWBE process, as well as construction supervision for the work, because we do not have a construction component to our office, so we would contract that out to an engineering firm to do on our behalf. So, like I said, we do have a conference call with them at noon today to further that dialogue. The good thing about having had discussions with the EDA now about 4 or 5 times in the last 2 weeks is that they are seriously considering funding this project at about $1.2 million investment. So that's kind of the updates on those 3 projects. The other 2 things that we wanted to discuss briefly was, I think Cheryl had asked, what is going on with these county and city task force? And so I kind of want to give you an update as to what, and Megan and I both are jumping on and off of these task force, depending on the schedules. The county task force really has been focusing on really information exchanges. What they've done in the past couple of months is they've really done a survey to all county businesses. They've used a web portal to solicit information as to what the impacts to these businesses are, what their needs are. Out of about 400 responses from businesses, about, I'd say 85% of the businesses says their #1 needs are grants or some type of financial assistance because of the loss of revenues that they've received. That prompted us to have some discussions with the county about taking their micro enterprise program and turning that into a direct recovery assistance program. The IGA committee on Tuesday approved recommending a contract with the IDA to administer it on behalf of the county, as opposed to doing it through a private consultant. That would save about $20,000 of monies in the grant to go directly to businesses. I view that as a positive thing. This is the first time in 2 years that the county has asked us to be sort of a partner in a grant program for them. In the past, we've worked with the village of Cooperstown, the town of Oneonta, but the county somewhat has been reluctant to have us administer their grants because we weren't a county agency. So that's actually a positive sign that they want us to do that. The problem with the $200,000 micro enterprise, and what I've explained to people, is that the city of Ithaca had a $500,000 grant program that they announced, and within 2 days they were out of money. This $200,000 is not going to go very far. The need is tremendous out there. But again, that's really the only financial assistance we've been able to come up with at the present time. The county task force also is really big into the marketing aspect. So they have a Shop Small Saturday online that they've been instituting, things along that nature. But there really isn't a concerted effort by the group to say, how are we going to reopen? I don't think anyone really understands how that's going to happen at this point in time. Last Thursday, we meet every Thursday at 11 o'clock. Last Thursday, Alan was there from the county treasurer's office. And he indicated that the county's treasurer sales tax is down by about 25%. They're expecting another anywhere between 10 and 20% reduction in state aid. Obviously, he doesn't have the bed tax numbers yet, but he believes obviously those are down, and that it is going to be a difficult time for the county. They have been discussing potential layoffs at the county level. I know they've been having a series of executive sessions with department heads on reducing budgets. And the bigger issue that Alan raised last week was that normally when the county, when somebody doesn't pay their real property taxes, the county holds the school districts and the towns harmless, that they pay the money for that, and ultimately will get reimbursed when the taxes are paid. He doesn't believe that this coming year they'll be able to do that, so that it may have an effect on school districts and town budgets as well. And that could be a big issue for some of our school districts that are already having financial problems. With respect to the city task force, they've recently, and Megan actually can maybe talk about this because I had to go to the IGA meeting when they had their financial update meeting, but they've basically broken it down into a marketing committee that's chaired by Barbara Ann Hegan, an infrastructure committee that's headed by Al Rubin, a financial assistance committee, which Judy Pagden, the community development director, heads up, a promotional committee, which is headed up by Katrina Van Zant from Destination Oneonta, thank you. And then they have a website portal that's being handled by Mark from Sweet Home Productions. They're still somewhat in the phase of trying to figure out where to go with this. They would like to reopen businesses as quickly as possible. There was some discussion, I know, last week closing off Main Street and having restaurants set up tables and chairs outside so that people could shop outside the buildings. The committee seems to want to do something like that versus what the mayor, and the mayor did not oppose that, but obviously privately he's also saying we don't want to open anything until we know it's safe. And he's got some grave concerns about having SUNY Oneonta and Hartwick with students coming back unless there's a clear path for how that's going to be done. So it's kind of a mixed group in that sense of what how to reopen. I don't think really anybody knows. I know Jeff Ward and I had talked about this a couple of days ago. It's difficult given the lack of direction from Albany to a certain extent on how that's going to occur. So that's kind of what the county and the city task forces are working on, to sum up real quickly. The other thing that we're both trying to do is we're both trying to figure out a way to market. This is the city task force as well as us, how to market to downstate and adjacent counties. So I've reached out to Sweet Home Productions to say, give us a proposal to how you would do it. They are obviously working with the city to do a similar proposal, and Judy's trying to figure out how to drum up money to pay for some of this as well. So we don't want to duplicate efforts, but at the same time, we don't want to have it drag on for 6 months and have nothing done. As part of the email I sent out early this morning regarding IOXIS, there was a link, for example, on the housing market, and that's the type of stuff we think that we could easily do, working with Sweet Home Productions to get a massive mailing out to types of businesses that we would like to attract here. In some of my previous experience, what I've seen is that downstate or out-of-state people that want to move up here are concerned about not just their employment, especially if they're self-employed and want to move up, but really the education system for their kids, as well as the hospital system. And I've had some discussions with Mark at Sweet Home Productions and Barbara Ann Deegan, and both agree that that's the type of marketing materials that we should be supplying. That if you're from downstate, you don't want to, for example, in Delaware County, they have a hospital in Margaretville. It has 15 beds. So if you have a real serious problem, you've got to drive all the way to Kingston, which is about an hour and a half drive. People don't, they want to know that there's a hospital in the community that they can get to that's quality. And so we want to market both the Oneonta Fox Hospital and Bassett Hospital as part of that marketing production. We also felt that it was, as a first run, that it would make sense to hit the alumni at Hartwick and SUNY Oneonta to have mailings going out to the alumni, trying to market them to come back to a more safe environment in the Oneonta area. One thing that we can't get from Sweet Productions is, and both the city, Judy and I have discussed this, is that we would like to have an idea from them as to what they think would be reasonable in order to produce this. What is given us is basically hourly rate by week, and if you run it out for a 4-month period, it's about a $14,000 to $15,000 budget. It's not a lot of money, but again, we would have to stay on top of them because I'm not sure that we just want them to go ahead and do what they've done. One of the problems that the marketing has with the Oneonta, city of Oneonta, is that they have an incredible web page that has all this information on it: where to buy, where to shop, who's open, information on the pandemic, hospitals. There is so much information on that you don't want to look at it. It's too much information. And what they do is they just keep adding information and information as information comes out. They'll have stuff from the Chamber of Commerce on their web page, and if you go to that local Chamber of Commerce information, it's got 200 different things on there. I mean, they just keep every day adding more and more onto it, so it gets overwhelming. And as somebody looking at it, you just say, I can't navigate through this. It's just, so we really want to sit down with Mark and figure out how to streamline this and only have the message we want to get out there. We've looked at other things, such as the cost of running an ad in a major news magazine that has large circulation in the New York metropolitan area. The cheapest one is actually the New York Times, which is about $650,000 for a full page ad in their magazine. Most of the magazines for a full page ad cost over $1 million. It's ridiculous, and that we wouldn't recommend spending that kind of money for a one-page ad. So I'd like to continue to work with Mark and trying to hone this down, work with Judy and see if we can split the costs. And that's kind of my summary on this right now. I think roughly a $15,000 budget would be adequate to get us through about 4 months of marketing with him. So I don't know where that stands on the agenda.
Yeah, I jumped around a little bit there, but that's fine. So I think that, does anyone have any questions for Jody? Looking for him to continue to pursue both the task force role, but also to reopen the county, but also then looking at, how do we continue to market if we might see a shift of both businesses and individuals coming up this way. I think a few of you have already pointed out the reality that telework may become some new norms for companies. may avail our area to attract some of those, both employees and or companies. So that would be the direction at this point that we're sending Jody down. So I just would entertain, does anyone have any concerns with that or have any input you'd like to add?
I could add, I think maybe some information, and Andrew might have more, but Friday, the governor's news conference, I think most of the schools are waiting and are expecting to get some information about what their aid cuts are going to be. And one of the trends in Central New York schools is that the administrations and the boards are looking to reopen contracts or to do one-year contracts where compensation is frozen to minimize layoffs. And economically, it would be a really positive thing if the school district didn't have to lay off a lot of people. There are going to be some, and I'm guessing that there may be some news for the county also on Friday. I'm not sure. Andrew can talk to that. The other issue is that they are working with the education department about the potential of actually bringing students into school buildings, public schools. I don't think there's any. I don't know how far they are, but they certainly don't have a plan in place at this point in time. So that's really up in the air also. So it's really a flexible situation, to say the least. The other last thing, Cheryl, is that the boards are really concerned about passing on tax increases to communities that are going to have a problem paying a tax level that was last year, let alone anything that would be an increase. So it's really, these budgets are really tough.
I just we had hours-long meetings yesterday, and we have another administration committee meeting on Friday. I mean, there will be news on Friday. There won't be any official action, my understanding, until the mid-month meeting on May 20th, because our committees aren't empowered to take, action other than, passing resolutions that ultimately would have to be approved by the full board. So I think, we'll I think have some news or updates on Friday after the admin meeting at 9 a.m. and then finalize for that mid-month meeting next week. I mean, I think that the Alan had reported yesterday that the sales tax, we just got we get 2 payments a month, and the first payment came in under, basically 25% difference, something like that, in a decrease. And then the second payment, which is a smaller payment, came in 37% or so difference from the same time period last year. So there's a huge issue confronting Otsego County, which is, not to get into the issues of how dependent we are on sales tax, but I mean, our property taxes, county property taxes in Otsego County, are the lowest in New York State, which is unfortunately going to have a devastating impact on us because we're so dependent on sales tax and and even bed tax. So I think the county is looking at a very difficult position this year and 2021 for sure. So and the school districts, I think, to Dave's point, Alan's meeting with them, I think today, to talk about the challenges the county has with cash flow and floating those unpaid school tax bills, and of course the county is securing an $8 million forget what the terminology is. Dave probably would know better. It's a payment in a front in lieu of a payment that we'll receive in the future. I would call it a loan, but there's another term for it. A lot of the counties are securing this fund, these funds secured on future payments that to help them through cash flow right now.
I think for the district, Jeff, revenue anticipation notes maybe
Yes, that's what it is.
maybe one of them, and I don't know how easy it is going to be for districts to secure those, but that's something that Jeff Lord could speak to.
Well, in general, I was gonna make a comment. You know, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg because, as everyone knows, you know, this economy is driven substantially by colleges and by tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And that not only is the sales tax deficits starting to show increases, they're going to show massive increases as we work through the summer. And I suspect that the bed tax revenues are going to be down 95%, just because of the lack of baseball camps activity and no room sales. So it's just the tip of the iceberg. 37% will go to 40, will go to 70. It's just not a good situation. I saw yesterday, I saw some initial budget actions that are being discussed of all places in Albany. They're making $10 million worth of cuts in their budget, and it's primarily staff.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that's Albany trying to get out ahead of what they need to do. It's going to get very difficult, and I don't know where it'll all end up, except as usual, pressure on the taxpayer.
I would just add to that 70+% of all school budgets are personnel. And so when you're looking for $100,000, or in some cases $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, the only place you can find that is salaries and benefits. So that's the issue that everybody's confronting.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for all that input. I think definitely we are in a different situation. And I guess I would also throw out, looking specifically at CEGO now, this is maybe twofold. One, what do you feel that we as an organization could or should be doing to aid or assist more than we already are doing? And then the other side being, do we feel that there's any material realignment of existing projects or efforts that should be made to either refocus or just understand that maybe the energy put into it at this time does not seem appropriate? So just open up to those two questions to the committee.
Well, I would suggest, as in any business, that any expense that's going out the door that doesn't have an imminent return or an imminent purpose, that we think about postponing. That just for preservation of organization, that there's no reason to get out ahead and pay a bunch of or any level of expense if we're not going to really be seeing any effect for some period of time. That's just for consideration. I think the projects like the joint projects that Jody reported on, IAXIS, custom, and working with IAXIS, that's where our energies have to be spent. There's no meaningful monetary thing that our agency is going to be able to do, not from a monetary perspective. $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 for a business, that's just not going to do anything. So I think our energy spent on projects that are identified, that there may be retaining IAXIS, it might be a joint venture with Custom and them, and perhaps the glass company in Richfield. Those are appropriate to try to get those across the finish line. And I applaud Jody's efforts in working with Empire State and continuing to, pursue and hopefully keep his arms around that funding. That's critical.
Yeah, the other thing that I reached out to, and I've talked to the Office of Community Renewal, the people who fund community development programs, and we floated out an idea that was done out in Illinois, and that was to give every hotel $10,000, and if we had but the more we thought about it, and they were receptive to that idea. They said, come up with a proposal and we'll help fund it. How do you want to help your businesses? $10,000. And when I talked to, for example, I talked to Jeff about this, Jeff Lord, that's meaningless to some of these hotels. I mean, to some of the smaller mom and pop, it does, but to these larger chains, they're losing way more than that. but there is some likelihood, and we continue to explore with the Office of Community Renewal, that we may be able to structure some programs to help some of our businesses. On a positive note for Cheryl and the rest of the projects committee, one of our projects down, we did submit a voucher request for $95,000 to the Cooperstown Distillery. Monday or Tuesday, they told me that they were processing that, and we should get a payment within 10 to 15 days. That will close that project out. So that's one less headache we have to worry about.
Just one thing, if I could, back to the digital marketing of the county. Two things. I'm concerned that Oneonta is significant in the county, but it's not the county. It's part of the county. So we have to be careful that we're a county IDA and we remain a county IDA, not Oneonta's IDA. The second thing is I'd like us to look at other digital marketing companies. They're, have somebody make us a proposal of what they would do with this challenge. I know some other firms that I've used for different purposes over the years that I'd like to hear more than one opinion. And just because the city's chosen Mark, I mean, he's a good guy, been around forever, but there are other ideas there too, and other people who might be more effective working in other markets.
I would tend to agree with you on that.
Experience, one of which I'm aware of.
The other thing, we're kind of putting this together as quickly as we can, but one of the things we thought about is that this is really going to benefit the realtors because they're obviously going to sell more homes. So we thought about maybe approaching the realtors and seeing if they would help pull some money into this out of their budgets to help us do a bigger marketing campaign. But yeah, if anybody has any suggestions for other digital marketing companies for us to talk to, the reason we looked at Mark is that he's been volunteering both at the county work and at the city committee meetings, doing all the web pages right now for free.
I was gonna I echo Tom's comments. I think just in the interest of due diligence that we should at least look at one or two other companies and we do have some here in Otsego County for sure.
So I do want to be clear that it seems like there's general support to continue to move down the road of pursuing some kind of marketing campaign around this, knowing that there's going to be potentially some fund expenditure here. So I just want to verify that that is the general feeling of the committee, and there's no one that's really thinking that this is a moment to save money. This is a moment we don't want to actually spend time on, just so Jody has that direction.
My only, I agree that an expenditure of funds makes sense. The only thing that I think would be worth pursuing, Jody, is also just to connect with Cassandra, because destination marketing has taken much more of a focus because they can't really promote to bring people here. So destination marketing is really looking at more the local promotion aspect of local businesses here in Otsego County, and have kind of focused more inward. So I'm just wondering, this might be a great opportunity to talk to destination marketing, which has a firm on retainer, and this may be a way for us to get more bang for our investment.
Yeah, I definitely will do that. Cassandra's taking the lead on the county task force for economic development. She's the one who asked me to.
It would seem to me that with Destination Oneonta, which is important and significant for Oneonta, we're always going to have to be working on trying to keep ourselves in alignment with the county's needs. We're a little bit different target. It's similar, but not the same. And where we can work together, we should. But I think the countywide solicitation, and I think it's obviously digital, and people who have a familiarity in bigger markets, if that's where we want to draw people from.
Hi, Josh Edmonds. I'm kind of new here, so I'm just been sort of listening and trying to get up to speed on everything that's going on. A couple comments on this topic. I think that it's smart to be conservative with the budget, but I also think that any decisions that are made now are going to be affecting us 6, 12, 18 months down the road. And I think that as many challenges come from the current sort of COVID scenario, there are a couple, benefits, I guess, and one of them is the whole concept of people working from home. And up in Otsego County, we can offer a lifestyle that may be of interest to a lot of people, especially as working from home becomes more of an option, where you don't have to be right at a big firm in New York City, but we have schools and other activities between museums and the arts, spread through Oneonta, Cooperstown, sort of the whole county area. And I would agree that digital marketing is the way to go. I had no idea how expensive an ad in one of those magazines would be, but there are some firms. The Otis Saga comes to mind because this is almost exactly what they spend a fair amount of time doing in terms of marketing. Is they are marketing, the Hudson Valley and the greater New York City area in order to attract clients and customers to come up to the Otis Saga. And I believe they use a firm based out of Cooperstown called Paperkite, which does a lot of digital marketing. Maybe something to look into.
Great idea.
Yes,
Thanks, Josh, and welcome to the team.
Thanks.
I would just remind people that after the World Trade bombings, the counties north of New York City, and I was in the Sullivan Orange area, had a tremendous surge in interest of people. And, having a daughter that's stuck in an apartment in Manhattan, there's a big difference between being stuck in an apartment and being stuck, in a house up here where you have a backyard, or in my case, you have farm fields all around you where you can get out and really get out in the sunshine and wander around. So this may be a real opportunity.
Thank you, everybody, for that input. It does sound like we are kind of all in the vein of pursuing this. I also don't want to neglect the opportunities that might even be presented for businesses. I just know ourselves, we're grappling right now with understanding, are there going to be new requirements to office layouts and space requirements necessary? And so this obviously could also be an opportunity as businesses are looking to or need to expand their footprint to potentially come this way and or use teleworking more so. So I think there's also a commercial side to not neglect in the opportunities to market this area.
One thing in preparing for that, do we have an inventory of cable internet access throughout the county? I know they've run a lot of cable in the last couple of years. That's Eagle Electric. Where are we as far as being hooked up? I mean, what needs to be done? Probably IDA or someone would need that in the marketing to have some idea. We can say we're ready to go, we can do it here, but how much can we do here?
I do know Otsego Electric has been running like gangbusters actually in the last month, especially to healthcare workers being able to do the telemedicine, but also they're getting to outreach areas that haven't been touched before. So that would be something that could be worth understanding and getting a new map or readout of where we are with that infrastructure. Jody, I don't know if you have any update on that.
Yes, Tim has been gracious enough to send us copies of all his maps. We don't have permission. I'll talk to him about that of making that public. But he has provided our office with that information. There may be a way that we can work with Tim, and well, what I'd like to do is probably have a group of interested people that maybe Cassandra, obviously Megan, Paperkite, if we go with them, Mark, Tim Johnson would be key. Maybe Josh has interest in wanting to be on this, but to have a group that we can meet more on a frequent basis, maybe once or twice a week, just on the marketing component and move this along. So yeah, I will reach out to Tim Johnson about this today.
So I'm not sure structurally how that works. Are you requesting a new subcommittee to be formed?
I think it would be,
give it some thought, because I think it has to be done at the board meeting.
I think it does. I think we need to have, because it's both just, it's not just the projects committee, it's also finance. So maybe if we could just have a small marketing group, a committee that could be short-term lived, maybe a couple of months, just so we can meet on a regular basis and hash out all the details of where we're going to go with this.
So I think that I just would propose, perhaps, if you're interested in being on that committee, is to shoot Jody an email this week. And then Jody, if you could have something formulated potentially for the board meeting on your recommendation and the team members to be a part of that, and then we can pass that.
Yeah, Andrew, you may be a good candidate because you know destination marketing really well, and may be able to provide some insight as their board members as to maybe working together on this.
Sure, you know, I'm happy to help with whatever makes sense.
Yeah, anybody who wants to volunteer would be great, because we really need to hop on this quickly and do it right. And obviously Megan will be in charge of it as opposed to me, because she's more technology oriented.
Okay, great. So I think we've pretty much covered the agenda. I don't know if there's anything, Jody, on the director's report. I feel like you've hit on pretty much everything that was there to highlight. So I would just, anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up today? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, thanks, guys. That will pass. Have a good day.
All right, Cheryl, thank you. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.